much later in college. As a matter of fact, when I enrolled in my first creative writing class, it was a class where I began writing short stories anchored in my Dominicanidad. When writing, it suddenly occurred to me that I had not read anything like the stories that I was writing, not anything Dominican enough or Dominican at all. I recall sitting in my college library at John Jay and conducting an online search for Dominican writers. A few came up, most of them dead already, and from the DR. And it was then that I found writers that have paved the way for us today. Among them, Julia Alvarez, yes. Juno Diaz, Angie Cruz, Nelly Rosario. And as soon as I found them, I devoured those books as well. It weren't many of them. Much later, with my love of poetry, I created a spoken word organization uptown where one of my focuses was to include Dominican writers who were doing the work. I met so many of them. Many of them are on my team. I met poets and novelists, playwrights, and I asked myself, why weren't these people widely known? As a poet myself, I was invited into spaces to share my work or present my book, which I self-published. I was invited into Dominican spaces where I thought I'd be welcome. Instead, I never felt more out of place. And the reason for this, I inferred, was because I had done something that was not embraced in those groups. I had written my book in English. Being Dominicana and writing my book in English was not very acceptable. And you may think this doesn't make sense, or perhaps it's ridiculous, but to prove my point, every year after that, I would send other writers to these spaces. Writers who, like myself, had written in English. I never shared my experience with them beforehand until after they returned from the spaces and complained about the same thing that I did. There was a lack of hospitality among these groups. It's then that I noticed, and I will say this in this room while I have you all here, that it was then when I noticed that the older generation of Dominican writers, those who only wrote in Spanish, were not interested in getting to know any of us, of mentoring us, of providing any insight into the writing world. So it turns out that I have this habit that if the space doesn't exist, I'm going to create it. Today, you have all shown up for this conference. Perhaps you are fans of Josefina, nuestra homenajeada, or fans of the work our platform is doing. Perhaps you're here simply to say you were here at the first annual Dominican Writers Conference. A conference focused on providing us with the tools for developing your craft, with a blueprint on how to break into traditional publishing, with access to an industry that isn't too diverse and inclusive of writers of colors. I want Dominican writers to shine and reach the heights of the literary canon, and that is why this organization exists. Today we also open these doors to every single one of you to honor Josefina Baez. After I completed my work yesterday, I went to hang out with Josefina. She was doing an interview that is coming out soon. And as I listened to her speaking, I knew that we chose the right person. Josefina is a trailblazer in her own right. And I hope that you all do your research on her. And I hope that you all come and sit at her panel. She is a self-taught writer, an actress, a storyteller. She's a badass in her own right. Josefina did not follow the rules of this older generation of Dominican writers that said you shouldn't write in Spanish. There's a certain format that you need to follow. She's not about that life. She's about paving her own way, and she's gonna make herself understood how she writes. And if any of you have read her books, I'm pretty sure you enjoy them all. Josefina, like I said, has done everything her own way, and she was the perfect person for us to honor today. So if you see her in the hallways, please give her a hug, give her a shout out, look up her work, share her work. If you want me to share her work, I will do that as well. But lastly, I just want to thank you all. This is immensely overwhelming to see how many of you have shown up to this, how my community has also shown support, and how many of you said, I'm doing a workshop, I'm putting together a panel, I want to do a manuscript review. That means the world to me. So I just want to tell you how grateful I am. That's the end of my speech. Our Congressman, Dominican American, one of my favorite people, Adriano Espaillat.